All right, welcome. Good morning. That was pretty good, but I've got a little bit of energy. If we add it all with your energy, then we'll just elevate the room. So good morning. Good morning. Perfect. Thank you so much. My name is Eric Love. I'm the Director of Staff Diversity and Inclusion, and it's been my role for the last 7.5 years to work very closely with our employee resource groups, helping them get up and running. And we're so excited to launch this one. So welcome. We've had so many people involved in launching this one. It's been really exciting. We've talked about NDAbility, but without the actual term, for several years, and then COVID hit, and it put, like many things, it kind of put it on the back burner, and then finally we hired Eve Kelly, who is our program manager for diversity and inclusion in human resources, and she worked very closely with Monique Fraser, who you'll meet shortly. They organized a steering committee, and which included many people from human resources and from across the campus. And so probably in the last 2 months, a lot of work, a lot of energy and combined talents. And here we are to launch a new employee resource group. So what I'd like to do is just tell you a little overview about our employee resource groups, their purpose, and then I'll just hand it over to Monique. So employee resource groups serve a dual purpose at Notre Dame. They are a support network. They provide professional development, social outlets, and kind of help people feel more engaged and help with belonging and some retention, I think, for our staff. They also serve a dual purpose. The other purpose is with human resources. They can help with recruitment, retention, educational activities for the general campus at large. And so we serve our respective populations on campus, but we also help with the mission of the university particularly. So we have currently 9 employee resource groups. We have the Adelante, which is a Latinx, Hispanic, Latino group. We have Black Faculty and Staff Association. We have Notre Dame Staff of International Descent. We have Spectrum, our LGBTQ+ organization. We have Thrive, Inspiring Notre Dame Women. I have Notre Dame Veterans Association. We have faculty and staff of the Association of Faculty and Staff of Chinese Heritage. We have, Veterans Association, Young Leaders of Notre Dame, and today we are launching NDAbility. We will launch another one in the next couple of months, and that one is focused towards indigenous populations, and so we're excited about that as well. So without further ado, I would just like to introduce to you Monique Fraser. So let's have a warm round of applause for Monique, and welcome all of you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Eric, and good morning. I'm so excited to be here. As Eric mentioned, my name is Monique Fraser. I'm the Equal Opportunity and Program Manager here at Notre Dame, and I've been here for about 8 years. I'm so excited about this launch. A little bit of background regarding my work here at Notre Dame. When I first arrived here, I was the OAE Program Manager, so I oversaw the accommodations process for faculty and staff and also visitors to campus. In the past 2.5 years, I transitioned to my new role where I help with accessibility as far as campus accessibility, hiring initiatives for individuals with disabilities, making sure that the hiring process is equitable, different programs on campus as well. So I'm excited about this. I still have a little bit of a hand in the accommodations process and help kind of oversee that as well with my colleague Sue Mummer, who does a great job with that process. So I'm excited to be here. And I'll go ahead and I'll help with the panelists with questions today. But I'd like to introduce Shelby from Community Services with All Deaf. She is our sign language interpreter who so gladly came to our event as well. We utilize this vendor community resource quite a bit on campus and for a lot of our events and different events on campus as well. So we're glad to have Shelby here. And I'll go ahead and introduce the panelists and we'll go ahead and get started. So today we have Rob Kelly, and Thomas Walshman and Amy Walter, and I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves and get a little bit of background, and we'll get started with the questioning. All right, Rob, would you like to give a little bit of introduction about you and some of the work that you do? You're welcome.
No? Maybe a little bit better? Okay. Rob Kelly, 9 months into a role as Senior Director of Operations at the Mendoza College of Business. I've been at the university for almost 16 years, a double domer, so this place sort of courses through my veins in a lot of different ways. I was invited to be the executive sponsor for NDAbility by Eve Kelly, no relation. And I was honored by the request and excited about the opportunity to be sort of at the founding of this employer resource group. As I look around the room, I see a lot of individuals that I know, so it's great. It's I think a testament to the sense of community and belonging that's already sort of informally been created amongst people who either have different abilities or have loved ones who have different abilities. And I'm excited to be a part of this and to see it grow from day one.
Hi, I'm Amy Walter. I've been working at the Notre Dame for about 7 years. I recently started as a development coordinator in the Department of Development, and I pretty much bleed blue and gold since I was born. I'm excited. When I saw that this group was forming, I was working from home, and I was literally just taken aback, and I was just like, finally. And I think I probably cried for about 15 minutes. And then I was invited to be a part of the panelists, same as Rob from Monique, and I'm just excited to see how we can help the Notre Dame community grow and accept one another for our differences. We've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go.
Hello, everybody. I'm Thomas Walshman. I've been with the university for about 6 years now. I work in risk management and safety. So I was born with a biocentral neural hearing loss, so I am deaf on both sides. I have 2 cochlear implants that help me hear and be able to talk today. So growing up, I faced a lot of challenges with accommodations when it came to public school and just getting the services that I needed. And so I've always been very passionate about, helping with those with disabilities. I want to make this easier for people, and so that's why when a couple of years ago I talked to Eric and we talked about starting this group, and he mentioned like COVID kind of dampered things, but I'm just super excited to be here today and want to collect feedback from each and every one of you on ways that we can improve things. So thank you for coming.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. We appreciate that background information, and we are so glad to have you on our panel today. We'll go ahead with some of the questions that we have today, and all of the questions will be for all of the panelists, and we'll take some time to go over some of those, and then we'll also have a chance to review some of the submitted questions that we had from our online registration that we'll go over. We won't be able to get to all of them. We had quite a few, but we will be able to cover a few and follow up with those who had those questions individually. All right, first question, and we can just start with Rob and go down the line if that works. What do you see as the biggest access issues in higher education or here at Notre Dame that you've been aware of?
Yeah, thanks, Monique. I think there are a number of obvious access issues, and I think Notre Dame is doing a phenomenal job of responding to many of them. My own personal experience, not here at Notre Dame, but in advocating for my daughter who has Down syndrome, has been that it's not so often the challenges that are presented to us that are the ones that are the most elusive. It's the ones that never present themselves to us. And so I think one of the biggest access issues is our ability to make people feel comfortable to self-select and to volunteer when they need an accommodation or they need help or they want support for a condition they have or a circumstance they have in their family or their life.
Thank you. Amy?
Let's see, probably with my son, he's 14, he's got cognitive delayment and speech impairment. And I think the biggest issue that I've had and had to face is just building that community within the school corporation, wherever you're at, trying to find out what services. I mean, it's not laid out. It's not laid out in a clear path. So for a mom who's searching for answers for their son or daughter, for that, you know, the child themselves. I mean, there's a lot of red tape. It's a lot of hard work. It's very isolating. It's depressing. I wish that there was a clearer path for parents like myself, because you have to dig into the weeds and just find out the resources that are available to you. So I think that the biggest issue that I see is that my son is on a certificate of completion for high school. And since we all, you know, these kids, they're beautiful. They have beautiful souls. They see the world in a beautiful way. And if we can just give them a chance to, even if he does graduate with the certificate of completion, what is his future going to look like? Is college going to be an option? You know, what if he wants to get his GED? You know, are there, you know, is employees going to work with him, you know, to complete that? Is there going to be like a community school or even Notre Dame, like if he gets a job here? How can he get his GED even though he didn't graduate from high school? Like maybe his maturity levels are going to come when he's 23. We don't know. But right now, on the path that he's on, I just hope that there will be a greater opportunity, maybe more of a clear path for, you know, families like ours behind me. If I can help in any way to make it clear, a clear path. We need a clear path for these families.
Thank you, Amy.
I 100% agree with that. So that was kind of one of my challenges growing up, is like there was no clear path. You know, every level of education I had to fight to get services. When I got to high school, it took 2 years for me to get a note taker. So those are some of the issues I had growing up. And then when it came to like looking at colleges, I really had to narrow down my focus on which college was going to provide me the best services. Where, you know, some schools I had to, you know, if I wanted a captionist or note taking in all my classes, I had to either resubmit a request every month or whatever that time period. So I ended up going to a school called Rochester Institute of Technology. So through the service request process is through the enrollment period. So when I go to select my classes, I had the ability to select my accommodations right there. And then from there, I was able to get the service I needed. I think in my 5 years there, I was denied once, but that was because there was the same class. There was another class that had the same curriculum that was available at a different time with the accommodations, and they worked around my schedule to put me in that class. So I hope, and I don't have any experience with requesting access here at Notre Dame, but I want to help make sure we can make that process as easy as possible for everybody.
Thank you, Thomas. And thank you all for sharing your experiences and some of the challenges that you guys have experienced. Can you let us know about a positive experience that you've had as far as requesting accommodations for yourself or for your family? And that could be in the educational system as well and other universities. And were there times when overcoming some of those challenges, you were able to have a positive experience at any point in time?
Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
All right, so kind of going back to RAT, just when I first enrolled at my freshman year and having those accommodations for that enrollment process. And been going at that time, like freshman year of college, it was the first time I had something easily available, and it wasn't tedious, it wasn't long, it wasn't painful. That was super relieving, and I really wish that we can have that experience for everybody everywhere. So.
Thank you.
Probably the positive experience that, as I was going through these questions, I think it was Corey's first year of kindergarten. He had just turned 5. And his kindergarten teacher at the time saw that I was struggling. I mean, I took my son to outside psychiatrist, psychologist, paid all this money to get a diagnosis. They didn't know. And then I'm like, okay, I'll get him into the school system. They will help with testing there. And she just really helped. She just came alongside of me, took me underneath her wing, and just guided me along the process, and was his kindergarten teacher for 2 years. And I'm just thankful for her to this day that she saw a mom that was struggling. It's a new territory. It still is. And I will forever be thankful for her. So we just credit to the teachers and the teachers that go beyond the call of duty.
Thank you, Amy.
So I haven't had a formal experience of requesting an accommodation at Notre Dame. I have been on the side of requesting accommodations on behalf of teammates, and in those experiences, I think they've been efficient and expedient and effective, and so I think that typifies my experience here at Notre Dame. If I can take this question a little bit of a different direction, one of the things that I have found about being at Notre Dame and having situations where we've had significant needs as a family to accommodate a health concern. My wife, when I was actually in the rotation program here at the university, and during that period of time, my wife suffered a detached retina, which basically put her face down for the better part of 3 months, and for 22 out of 24 hours a day. And that experience forced me to basically work half days for an extended period of time. And I found the university's benefits, time off, and the sort of general understanding and accommodations of those that I was working with to be accommodating in a way that was tremendously generous.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that about the flexibility. And we do have just generous benefits in ways that we can accommodate families, whether that's FMLA, intermittent FMLA, flexibility working with schedules. So I'm glad to hear that worked out well. And that's a good segue into our next question, into how do you communicate with you, how do you communicate you or your family's needs with others? And that could be with coworkers, family members, with teachers, but also when needs come up, such as you need to be there for your family different ways, and you were able to give a good example that you've utilized the flexibility in your schedule and benefits. So I think you've answered that, but if you'd like to add, that's great. But Amy, if you'd like to take it from there.
Okay, let's see, how do I communicate? I'm still learning that, to be honest with you. That's what I hope this group can help with, is because, I don't want to portray that it's always easy to communicate exactly what you need, because sometimes you just don't even know. But I think just being open and communicating to your managers, your coworkers, that some days are just a struggle, some days a win, some days it's not a win, in the mornings. I'm trying to get everybody off to school. So I think a lot of patience, a lot of understanding, non-judgmental. Man, we don't need that. I'm still learning that one. I'm still learning how to communicate my needs.
Wonderful. And I think this resource group will be a great resource to have as we talk about even asking for help, because that can be a challenge. If you have someone who's a dependent or working with a family, that can be a challenge to communicate those questions to others and involving them, and communicating, disclosing that family members or yourself, you have a disability. So we'll talk about some of those challenges and ways that people have kind of overcome that to be able to be vulnerable and accept help from others. That can be a bit of a challenge. So we'll definitely cover that in our group. So thank you for mentioning that. Thomas?
Yeah, so I've always been, so growing up, I was very, I don't know, I was very insecure about, my disability. I felt uncomfortable, I felt different, I have these magnets on my head, and I, would think that people would, always look at me, but in reality, people were just curious. And so one of the things when I got to college, it just kind of made a switch where I was like, you know what, I'm going to share my experience. I want to talk about it. So for me, I've been very transparent with people. I'm very upfront with them, be like, hey, need you to speak up a little bit, or ask you to talk more loud and clear. My colleagues at RMS, when I first came on board, I told them what needs I needed, what I need from them for me to be successful and for me to be able to hear and communicate with them. So my family, my parents are my heroes. They help pave the way for me. And so even when we go out to eat and stuff, they're always supporting me, and they understand, they know what my needs are. Sometimes when I go to a restaurant, it's loud and noisy, I can't hear the waiter. My brother would be like, hey, they have Caesar salad, they have a Cobb salad, whatever it is, they're there to help me. So for me, the thing that's helped me the most is just being transparent and honest with people. And so what I'm hoping with this group, we just bring more education, more awareness with it, and that can help make things easier for others. I'm super passionate about cochlear implant awareness, because I know if I can educate you guys on it, someday you're going to meet someone else that has a cochlear implant. You're going to help make that conversation easier. You're going to already have that connection. So that's what I want to do.
Thank you, Thomas. And that's a good segue into our next question, but I think we've touched a little bit on the question coming up, but if you'd like to add any additional information, definitely feel free. How would you like members of the Notre Dame community to engage with you or your loved ones regarding their disability? So I think, Thomas, you did a great job of touching on that and how you'd like others to engage with you and approach you. If there's anything else that you'd like to add, or Amy or Ken.
Yeah, please, at any time, feel free to ask questions. I love talking about the technology. I have parents go up to me all the time asking me, is this an option for my kids? So please, if you're curious about it, please let me know.
Wonderful, thank you. Amy or Ken, any additional information that you guys, or Rob, I'm sorry.
I'll jump in. Who doesn't love to talk about their children? So I have on the wall behind me in my office, I have 5 children, and so I have a family photo and then sort of these large 5x7s of each of my kids. And my daughter, Keelan, she wears her condition on her face, right? So Down syndrome is very visible from that perspective. And I want people to ask about that. I love it when people recognize it, and because, and oftentimes it'll come out, I have an aunt or a cousin or a sister. And I think that I don't want to presume that others are as comfortable about that, but I hope if somebody knows me, they know that I would love to teach you more about Down syndrome, talk to you about my own personal experience with having a loved one with Down syndrome, and yeah, if the questions aren't usually coming to me, I'm probably trying to find a way to introduce it into the conversation anyways.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I was going to say, lost my train of thought. Sorry. How would I like the Notre? For me, I think it would be acceptance. I want my family to feel accepted or Corey to feel accepted. I want him to feel the freedom to express himself and for us to be his voice. Even right now, we're teaching him how to use his voice to advocate for himself. But I think that this would be a good group for our families to get together and try to find each other's voice, or they can just learn from one another how to speak up for themselves, because we're not always going to be here. So we got to, teach our kids behind us to, it's okay to speak up.
Right. I think that's great. And we will talk a lot about being your own advocate throughout this ERG, and being able to have your voice and things that you can do and ways that you can speak up, whether that's in the employment setting and kind of the social setting. So I think that'll be a great area of topic that we'll cover during that ERG. Thank you. And to the next question, I will preface this question that we do understand and we are highly aware that there is a stigma regarding disabilities. And so we want to, part of the reason that we're creating this group is to dispel that stigma of disabilities and become more open and honest in bringing education to others regarding individuals with disabilities and how to advocate and how to support this group and also be an ally as well. So the next question, do you feel as if there is a stigma around discussions of disability? If so, why? And anyone can take that question.
Yeah, I do. I grew up with it. I know how it feels. So, it's hard to say why. For me at least, I feel like a lot of times, I don't know, I do think there is some stigma, and I know if it's lack of education or if it's, there's like kind of going back on like not enough like things clear for some of the individuals, and so I don't really know the answer to that, but right now I just think it's really the lack of education and awareness, and there needs to be more conversations about it. And I do believe we're heading to that direction. You're seeing it. We have all these ERG groups with different topics, and so and I'm already noticing change in the last couple of years, especially the last 5 years. There's been less of a. I personally feel like there's been less of a stigma, but and that with these ERG groups is education. We bring more awareness to it. We can help eliminate that stigma.
Thank you, Thomas.
For me, I felt the stigma like early on, and like Thomas said, we have to educate people. We have to educate our kids. I mean, it's not, like my son's going into high school next year, and it's going to feel like the first day of kindergarten all over again, because we need to educate others, our kids. We got to do better. We have to do better. We have to be transparent. We have to be open, and I'm willing to talk about it. I'm at the place now where if we need to talk about it, let's talk about it. And I know I'm just very thankful that this group is forming, because it all goes back to these kids finding their voice.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on this question of the stigma. Again, I think it gets back to there's an iceberg of things we don't know because people are afraid to share them, and it's all that stuff that's below the water that so many of our colleagues, I think, are maybe reluctant to share as a core part of their identity. And that can inhibit them from getting the support and the accommodations that they need. In my own experience, being a part of the launch of this group has opened up a tremendous number of conversations that I've had subsequently. People who've approached me to say, I have a child, a sister, a brother, or I have a condition, but you can't see it. And just the excitement, the general excitement around a creation of a group like this is, so I think it's having the intended impact. The other thing I would say is that in addition to lack of education, I think it's a lot about fear. And speaking very personally, I shared this story in the ND Works article that launched the ERG, at least through communication. I told about the day my daughter was born, and we were not expecting a child with Down syndrome, so we got our diagnosis basically at birth. And so, those feelings of stigma in that first 48 hours were very real for somebody who was not expecting that, and had to then think about, how am I going to present my child to my family, to my coworkers, to my community, to my neighbors? What are they going to say? How are they going to react? Like, what is that experience going to be like? And to sort of bring it full circle, and to sort of reiterate what I put in the article, or what was put in the article, it was an amazing response that I got from my coworkers at Notre Dame. We had never felt more loved by an organization that I had worked at. And it was within the first year that we had moved back to this area to come work at the university. And it was like this tremendous affirmation that we had picked the right place and taken that leap of faith into doing the right thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if you haven't had a chance, definitely feel free to read that ND Works article, a great article just talking a little bit more about the ERG and the steering committee, and a little bit of information regarding some of our efforts that we've had in the past as well. So thank you. And to our last question, what are your hopes for NDAbility?
I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to you two. So I put my thoughts on this sort of in two categories. I think there's sort of what are my hopes personally from a tactical perspective, like what do we do next, what are our next steps? And then I think there are hopes around our impact. And I think from an impact perspective, my hope is that we do get a greater sense of belonging at Notre Dame, especially around this particular area, and that we see, future versions of gatherings like this that fill the room, and maybe we even have to find different rooms that are bigger because we have more interest and greater sort of identification with this particular ERG. Tactically, what I really hope is that we're going to move quickly to sort of formalizing the structure for the ERG, meaning we need to put together some leadership for the ERG itself. I look at some of the other ERGs on this campus, and I see the ones that are the most active, the ones that are the most effective, and they have strong leadership. And so we need some strong leaders to step up from within our ranks here at the university to help take on this really, really important initiative.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so kind of what we just touched upon there is just like, I really want to see this group grow. I want to see more involvement. I want to receive feedback from people. We were very fortunate to work here at the University of Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has been nothing but really special and good to me. And so just trying to figure out ways we can make improvements, make things easier for people. And the biggest thing for me is I really want to see this group grow. And the more growth we get, the more feedback, more involvement, and what we just kind of talked about, and just kind of make sure we get some structure in place, and just really see this place grow. So.
Thank you.
And for me, I'd like to see this group grow. I want incoming families, whether they're on the verge of getting a diagnosis, or they're in the process of getting a diagnosis, or they're older and getting diagnosed, and because adults are still getting diagnosed for things that we didn't know about even 10 years ago. So I really want this group to just be all about community and connection, and for parents, for moms, for young moms. I've walked this journey if I could just help one person, one mom with a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old who's not walking yet or struggling to talk, and you have to use sign language to communicate. Like, those are just, personally growing times, and painful and joyful, and then you learn who you can talk to, you learn who you can't talk to, and we need that. We need that. If this group was here, 20, well, he's 15, so I can't say 20 years ago. If this group was here, 12 years ago, it just would have been, or just a group in general. Instead of just going out there and trying to find my own group, I had to dig deep and find my, the people that I felt comfortable with. And so to have this group be available to, like, a struggling mom or dad or grandparents, come to us with questions. We've been through this. We're still going through it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. We appreciate that. Thank you all for answering our questions and being very vulnerable with your answers, and being honest. I think that helps get some of the conversations going when people are honest and transparent. It gives people encouragement to come forward with their own stories as well, in a safe space. So we definitely appreciate all of the questions. We do have a few questions that we did receive from our registration that we'll go over. And some, if you feel led to answer any of these questions or add a little bit, we'll definitely do that as well. But I'd like to add that for this group, all of the things that the panelists mentioned are things that we will try to accomplish. Our goal is to really bring awareness to campus regarding the group and educate others regarding individuals with disabilities, educating those with apparent, non-apparent disabilities, which are also termed as invisible disabilities as well. There's also a common stigma that there's just physical disabilities. It's to really educate that there are mental health disorders as well that we'll talk about, and disabilities, and having events, social outlets, and just providing resources for that group as well. And to talk a little bit and bring awareness about our internal process that we have here at Notre Dame, so that people are aware in conjunction with our current trainings regarding our process. A lot of people aren't aware that we have an internal process or a policy in place for individuals with disabilities and how we go about handling accommodation requests. So that'll be our goal as well, and to also partner with other ERGs regarding events, but also to have the backing of leadership as well, because that's an important component to making the group successful. So we definitely appreciate that. And we'll have more information coming from the listserv regarding the first official meeting, so that we can kind of get that going right away, and working to expand that group from that steering committee as well. Okay. So we'll go ahead and answer some of the questions that we have. Again, we had a lot of great questions. Question?
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just,
you're fine.
I wanted to comment back on your question about the stigma, and I really related to many things Amy said. I do think, above all else, it can be very isolating to be in this situation. But I think part of what Notre Dame needs to do is overcome something really difficult in that our society, and particularly Notre Dame, productivity, efficiency, high intellectual accomplishment, degrees, it's all really prized, and it's a competitive environment. And that's our society in general, but even more so maybe here. And, when you're not the fastest, and when you're not the smartest, and when you probably can't get college degrees, you're even more marginalized. And I think there are so many gifts that everybody has that they can contribute. We need those very courageous people at the top to say, we do have roles for individuals like this. And I think they can contribute, because when our children are young, they do have somewhat of a support system outside of us through the school and some services, and it is hard to navigate. But then, when they finish school, then they're adults. And special needs kids grow into special needs adults. And they want to feel productive, and they want friends to feel human. And I think these are Notre Dame is really good at something when it puts its mind to it. And I think we have a long way to go to try to educate and just make people feel comfortable with the idea that, you know, this is so-and-so, it's okay that this person doesn't have 2 college degrees, and this person can still contribute, and that's where I would love to see us try to think of ways we can build our community. Because when you have a family member that has no job and can't drive, you're here as an employee too, and you're so responsible. So you can't maybe be as productive as you could be. And there's a lot of need around here, many things that we could use extra hands to do. And I just think there's great opportunity there. But I think that all comes in with this stigma of you're not the best or the best. So it's hard to talk about.
Well said.
Yeah, very well said. And thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for bringing attention to that. I'm so glad that you brought that up. And we'll talk a little bit about some of our past initiatives and our current initiatives just regarding employment. Because again, we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be productive. And what we learned working with our community and different resources and vendors within our community is that that's the first step to feeling productive, is getting back into the workforce for individuals who have left the workforce due to their medical condition or disability, and getting them back into the workforce. So those who have just graduated from high school and who need that opportunity to be productive in the workforce. And so we'll talk a little bit about also in that group, but also today regarding our past initiatives and what we're currently working on and bringing back and kind of relaunching in that area of education. Yes. Yep, go ahead.
So I do want to talk about relating to the stigma. A couple of months ago, we have quite a few people that are deaf that work here at Notre Dame. But I feel like Notre Dame here, they kind of shrug us off because they don't want a lot of deaf people working here. So I feel like they just kind of like don't want too many of us here in the same place on the same team. You know, there's a lot of work opportunity, but also for me, I'm really good at reading lips. But deaf people, not all deaf people are that way, and they have a right to have an interpreter, a sign language interpreter during their meetings.
Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry to hear that. I do work with a lot of different departments that do have individuals who are hearing impaired, and we do have resources available for accommodations such as interpreters, and we've provided that quite a bit for employees. I think it's a lot about awareness and making sure that we're communicating that to the employees and also faculty and also students regarding the available resources. But I have worked with quite a few different departments, and in particular working with individuals with hearing impairments and definitely if there's any type of concerns or anything that we can look into, we do have resources available with HR, but we do collaborate a lot with employees. We actually just had a meeting just maybe about a month ago. Sue and I met with the department, and it most likely is your department as well too, but just ways that we can make the building more accessible, ways that we can put forth efforts into helping with meetings, a lot of different things. So we have managers that are reaching out and wanting to support their employees. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah. And we'll talk about that in the ERG, but again, there is an internal process with the university, and that's for everyone, that if there are accommodations that are needed while they're at work, we do provide those accommodations and work with their medical providers and with their departments. Again, CSAD, who we work with community services with all deaf, we do utilize them quite a bit for services over the years, for quite a few years. So they are a resource that we reach out to quite a bit for meetings, for a lot of different events, and that could be on a day-to-day basis as well too. Thank you. Go ahead.
I kind of just learned something. We've been wearing masks for a couple of years. We know it's uncomfortable. At least it's uncomfortable for me. I get hot. But we can manage it. But if you rely on reading lips and everybody's wearing a mask, that just adds an incredible barrier to someone doing their
So when we were going through COVID, we had quite a few challenges, and Sue and I worked with a number of faculty and staff who had hearing impairments, and so we were able to utilize clear masking and a lot of different things that we could utilize to, and you have a clear mask. So we were able to utilize a lot of different resources, order a large number of those to provide for faculty who were teaching or for employees. So that was a big challenge, and we were able to work with a lot of different companies to provide those resources as well. So good point.
And I use lip reading a lot, but it's still my right as a deaf person to have a sign language interpreter there for me in case I can't read lip, in case there's a problem, in case something else is going on.
Thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions before we move on? But thank you so much. I really appreciate you bringing forward, and I thank you for having a clear mask so that we can kind of see that. But our goal, again, is to educate as well, to make sure that people are aware of the things that we are doing, ways that we can improve, and kind of where we're planning to move forward to as well. So thank you. So one of the questions that we did receive, does the university, and that's a really great question that you brought up, does the university have an employment program like Microsoft or Dell, for example, that works with people on the autism spectrum? So we do. So we created a program back in 2000. We started that committee back in 2016. I was able to oversee that program. It was called Transitional Employment Program. So we worked with various communities, various resources and vendors, such as the Logan Center and also the Clubhouse of St. Joe County. In particular, Clubhouse works with individuals who have non-apparent disabilities, so mental health disabilities, as well as Logan Sport. So we created this program where we would work with community members with individuals who had disabilities, and we would provide temporary employment for those who were coming back into the workforce or starting brand new in the workforce, to provide opportunities for transitional employment. So that would mean they would work in a position, get acquainted with that job. If they were comfortable, they would stay in that position. We would frame it for about 2 to 4 months so that they can transition, get those skills, and if they wanted to stay, they could stay, but if they wanted to transition to a different job on campus, we would provide that opportunity at a different department. So we worked with building services, St. Michael's Laundry, some of the dining services as well, to provide those employments, and we were able to hire about 6 employees through that process, but we had a lot of transitional who were able to learn some of those skills. They were to go through the hiring process to learn some of those skills for the hiring process, answering questions, going through that process, working with hiring managers. Really great program that we were able to go through through 2020, right before the pandemic, and so we put a lot of things on pause, but we are currently working again with Logan Center and with Clubhouse of St. Joe County to start that program. We've actually started it last month, so we have that underway again, and so we're increasing our numbers for hiring and having that opportunity, so that way we're able to hire individuals with disabilities of all ranges and provide them the opportunity to be productive here at Notre Dame. So we're excited about that, to relaunch that, but that was a great point to bring that up. So that is one of our programs, which is similar to Microsoft. They do have certain employment opportunities, Microsoft in specific regarding autism, but for us, we don't want to have a group just related to autism or a different type of medical condition. We want to make sure that we're hiring all types of individuals who have different various medical conditions, whether they're permanent or temporary. So that's why we've kind of created this transitional employment program for everyone. So we'll have more information and communication regarding to the Notre Dame community regarding that. We had a little bit of information in the ND Works regarding our previous efforts and how we're relaunching that. But we're really excited to work with the community and provide these opportunities. Any questions at all so far? I want to be mindful of time. I'll answer maybe 1 or 2 more questions. How can the Notre Dame administration best support individuals with disabilities for staff, faculty, and students on campus? I think the panel did a great job of explaining how to best support that. And again, that's being open, being honest about that, being educated, being open to being educated, learning, being able to learn more about different resources, different backgrounds. So I think that's the first start, and being willing to really have challenging conversations. I think we start with having conversations, and that leads to change. So I think you guys did a great job of answering that question for us. We'll have time for one more question. Does the university have policies to address accommodations and educate supervisors? So we do. We have an ADA policy currently on our HR website, an Office of Institutional Equity website as well, that explains what the process is, what policies we use. We use the EOC policies to help us as far as how to approve accommodations through that process. We also have information on what the process looks like. We also train managers doing ND Essentials. We also provide information at orientation. But we also go to different campuses and we kind of do in-person training as well to educate not only faculty but staff and also managers. We have 2 separate trainings to educate them on the process, how to best support individuals with disabilities going through that process, and then also for employees and faculty on how to request an accommodation. So we kind of go through campus and provide those trainings. Again, there's room for improvement where we're increasing those trainings. We are currently working on launching an online training for the upcoming fall that covers individuals with disabilities, talking about the ADA and how to request an accommodation and different resources with our office. So that'll be launching soon and we'll have more information as well. Okay. And just for time, we'll have Eric come up. But thank you again for all of your answering the questions and providing, again, being vulnerable with us and answering our questions. So we appreciate it.
All right, thanks again for coming. And could we please have a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your insight, your expertise. And thank you for the questions that came from the audience, also expertise in learning. So we do have gifts for our panelists. Are they, they're all the same? All right, so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so before we go and get some food, I really would like to thank the people who have been involved in the steering committee to help us get to this point. Eve Kelly, who could not be here today, and Monique Fraser, Pam James, Brent Moberg, Brent Fragnoli, Sue Mummert, Denise Murphy, who has been extremely helpful in bringing some new ideas from different other vendors and different colleagues that she's had professional experience with. And I also want to thank Tanya Robinson for doing the event and getting our food and the rooms ready. So if we can have a round of applause for everybody who's been involved. Thank you all so much.